So I opened our study of the book of Judges the weekend of January 18th and 19th by walking us through the last 3 chapters, basically giving away how the book ends. So you can go back if you missed that and watch that one online, because I don't have the time, nor do I have the stomach, really, to recap this complex and frankly disturbing series of stories that closes the book of Judges. It ends with no heroes, no good guys. God's people are lost. And the final verse in the book of Judges, chapter 21, verse 25, reads this way. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And throughout the year, over several series, we will look at the stories of the judges, the deliverers, these folks that God raised up to redeem and restore and save his people when they cried out, God, where are you? And we're going to sort of land on 3 themes that you'll hear will keep coming up throughout these series. And the first one is this, is that all of us have this internal battle that we want to do what is right in our own eyes. And I spent a great deal of time in that first sermon discussing that. And secondly, this other theme is this, that the book of Judges, there's actually more verses dedicated to infighting happening in Israel than there are to foreign wars. So we're going to look at this fact that frankly, please track with me on this. When Christians fight against Christians, we do more damage to the kingdom than the world can throw at us. And then the third theme that we'll look at is this thing that scholars refer to as the Deuteronomist Cycle. And here up on your screens, you'll see this cycle. It might be familiar to you. First step is that we're faithful. We're obeying God and there's peace. And then we turn from God and we do what is right in our own eyes. And our behavior then angers God. He steps aside and allows oppression to happen. And then we cry out, God, where are you? And this is where we've been for the last 4 weeks. So if you missed the last set of sermons, the God, Where Are You series, we rested in these moments when God seems distant or disinterested in our struggles or our difficulty or our pain. And if you were not here, I really would encourage you to go back and watch these. Hear me, I really consider those sermons some of the finest preaching ever at Northway. And I want to thank Doug Melder and Kent Chevalier publicly. They invested hours and heart and soul into that topic. And then in this cycle, lastly, God hears the cries of his people and he has compassion and he raises up a judge to deliver his people. And let me briefly right now sort of reset this time period for you. So where does the book of Judges fall in Israel's history? So Moses, he leads out the 12 tribes of Israel out of slavery, out of Egypt. They're headed to the promised land. And if you know this story, he sends out 12 spies to the land to scout it out. And Joshua and Caleb, they come back and they say, there's some big dudes over there. I mean, and there's some really powerful cities, but our God said it's ours, so let's get ready to rumble. I mean, that was their attitude. The other 10 spies saw the same exact thing, and they come back and they say, we don't have a chance. I don't care what God says. And because of their disobedience, the people wander in the desert for 40 years, allowing that generation of disobedient and fearful Israelites to fade away. And Moses dies, and then Joshua takes over, and he leads Israel to the land that God had promised all the way back to Abraham. And once they are there, the land is divided among the 12 tribes of Israel. And there is peace in the land. And God's people, they are poised for what should be a great season. And then in Judges 2, it's recorded that Joshua dies, and in verse 9 it reads this way, and they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord, or the work that he had done for Israel. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. And they abandoned the Lord and the God of their fathers who had brought them up out of the land of Egypt. Folks, did you catch that right there? One generation later, the nation begins to turn from God. That right there should just remind us, folks, it is so important for parents to pass on their faith to their children. And let me just say, across all campuses, take full advantage of the Family Matters ministries at Northway, because it is so important for you to take the lead in leading your children to God. So I want to briefly now just look at the first three judges that are listed in the book of Judges. They're in chapter 3, only 24 verses dedicated to describe them. So here we go. The first judge, Othniel. He's a stud. I don't know how else to say it. Wait, you'll hear what I mean by this. Judges 3, verse 7. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord and their God and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the people of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. But when the people of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the people of Israel, who saved them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he judged Israel, and he went out to war. And the Lord gave him Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand. And his hand prevailed. How many times are they going to put this person's name in it? Cushan-Rishathaim. So the land had rested 40 years. Then Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. A couple things here I want you to grab a hold of. Did you pick up on who Othniel's uncle was? His uncle was Caleb, one of the two spies to Joshua and Caleb, right? They came back and said, we can take these fools. Rumble, young man, rumble. And there's this story that goes all the way back to the book of Joshua, where Israel is battling against this one city called Kiriath-Sepher. And what Caleb says is, anybody that can take that city, I'm going to give them this incredible plot of land and an incredible woman for your wife. And if you go back and look in that story, it's Othniel. He steps up and he did it. So Othniel, he's got this rich heritage of faith and family. He's got this great piece of land, and it is him who God raises up as the first judge to restore his people. Othniel, he is solid. He's a likely hero. He's a great warrior. He has a proven family and faith heritage behind him. And this is a clean, what I would say, this cycle, it's complete. There's peace in the land. And I say it's clean because you're going to see as we progress through these other judges over the coming months, it's not always going to be so clean. Some of these judges are not going to be upstanding, courageous pillars of society. Frankly, they're going to do some pretty shady things. And the text tells us that there's peace in the land. And again, the people turn from God, and this time it's the Moabites that take over, that oppress Israel for 18 years, led by their king, a man named Eglon. And I'm just going to tell you this story, okay? So I'll put a verse or two up, but it's found in Judges 3, verses 12 through 23, and it's a doozy. So you can go back and read it on your own, but it says that God raised up Ehud, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. And the Benjamites were one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they're the tribe that nearly got wiped out by the other 11 tribes at the end of the book, that I spoke a lot about them in that sermon back in January. It talked at length about that the Benjamites, they were known to be ferocious warriors. And Ehud, he may have indeed been a lefty, as it said, but it also could mean that he was trained to use a sword with equal skill in either hand. See, young Benjamite boys, it's reported that they had their right arms tied to their waist, and they would have to learn how to train with a sword and a sling with their left hand. so that when they went into battle, they could confuse their enemy by having their shield and their sword in opposite hands as to the custom. In boxing, they call this being a southpaw. And a lefty or lefties, they are difficult to fight because everything is coming at you backwards. So Ehud, he's from the baddest warrior tribe, the Benjamites, in Israel. And he was most likely their top Navy SEAL. Okay, that's who he was. And he was chosen to deliver, it says, the tribute or the payoff, the ransom, the kesh to King of Eglon, right? He's going to take the tribute to him and pay him off. But he has another plan in mind, okay? He's on a different mission, the story points out. He fashions a small sword, and he ties it to his leg, and he hides it there under his garment, and he delivers the cash, and he sends away those that helped him carry it in. And in verse 19, it says this, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he commanded, the king says, silence. And all of his attendants went out from his presence. And Ehud came to him as he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. Okay, what's a cool roof chamber? Most believe it's actually a rooftop, large, private bathroom. And the king is described in here, Eglon, as a very fat man, and he was sitting on the pot. That's what's going on in this story. You can go back and read it for yourself. And it says in there that he arose from his seat. And some versions of the Bible actually say that he arose from his throne, which is just funny. I mean, that's funny, right? You can't make this stuff up. See, some of you need to read your Bibles more. So Ehud the lefty, he draws his sword and he takes him out. Now, I'm going to spare you the details, but go back and read them, man. I'm just telling you. He flees. He goes to the hill country of Ephraim, and he sounds the battle trumpet, and Israel rallies under his leadership, and the Moabites are defeated. And then there's peace in the land again. In the very next verse, the cycle begins again. And the people turn from God, and God becomes angry, and this time it's the Philistines that have a turn oppressing. And the third judge in this little opening section, he only gets one verse to this guy. In chapter 3, 31, it says, after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, who killed 600 of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel. That's all we know about him. Some scholars that believe that based on his name, and his father's name, that he may not have even been Jewish, because his name would have been connected deeply to the Hittite people. And it appears that he is a farmer because he uses a common farming implement as his weapon, an ox goad. What is an ox goad? An ox goad is simply a stick with a sharp point on the end of it to prod the ox along as they're plowing fields. So a farmer that may not have even been Jewish with a stick was chosen by God to take out 600 Philistines to redeem Israel. That's the three judges that launch the story of the judges. If you could, guys, could you put that Deuteronomic Cycle back up on the screens? And I want to take a few moments and speak to the right side, what is highlighted there. 3 times the people turn from God. They have the land. God wants them to live peaceably in a theocratic society. Basically, not a monarchy where they had the king. God wants them to live that God is their king and to get along in the land that he's given them. And 3 times they turn away from God and they live or seek or pursue other things than God. And this brings out God's anger. And some would even call that the wrath of God, followed by an oppressor invading them and owning them. And for the next several minutes, I just want to maybe re-lens those 3. Could I have all of us together rethink those 3 aspects of the cycle? Why? Because this is really important. Hear me on this. I really believe that there's some people here today across all of our campuses that may not even realize that they're currently somewhere in one of those spots in the cycle. See, when we turn away from God, where do we turn? My guess is most of you don't have little altars to foreign gods in your basement that you turn to and worship, right? I think at times when we turn from God, it is blatant. We know what we're doing. We know that what we're about to do flies in the face of what God would want, and we don't care. We're going to do what's right in our own eyes, and we're going this way. I do believe that sometimes that happens. However, I believe that all too often it's much more subtle than that. That we slowly turn from God. One day He is our priority, our worship, and our affection. And then slowly, we just think He's not enough. Or we think that maybe He doesn't know what's best for us. And we begin to turn. And we do that. At times we can feel distant from God. We feel even lost. We wonder why is life so hard? And I think it's in those moments that we've turned from God and we're not even aware that we've done it. So quickly, I want to go through 3 places that I think that we turn to without even realizing it when we turn from God, and see if one of these might line up with you. And the first one is this. The first is probably the most common. It's the default position of turning from God. It's when we turn to ourselves. We convince ourselves that a better version of ourselves will be the solution to my satisfaction. We say, thank you, God, for saving me and rescuing me and all that spiritual stuff, but I'll take it from here. And we turn to ourselves. We think that a future version of ourselves in our mind, we get this future version and we work real hard at improving ourselves. Because if we could just do that, everything would be grand in the land, right? And we go after this more attractive version of ourselves, or maybe a more wealthy version of ourselves, a version with a sweeter car or a bigger house. And this is why the best-selling books in America are not the classics. Do you know what they are? Self-help books, right? See, folks, and I have some sad news for those of us that turned there. It's an empty well. When we turn to ourselves and away from God, we will continually disappoint ourselves. When you make yourself your own God, you will let yourself down. The second place that we turn to when we turn away from God might be that we turn to others. I cannot believe how many of us believe that others will complete us. Thank you, Jerry Maguire, for leading an entire generation astray with "you complete me." See, at the root of every fracture and foundational brokenness in our relationship, whether it's friendships or marriages or parents to child, is that somehow you will satisfy and complete me. It's a type of romanticism that's poison if you place others above God. Folks, listen, I love my wife. I mean, she is incredible. She is a gift from God, and outside of my salvation, the greatest gift that God's ever given me. But she's not my God, and she has not completed me and will not satisfy my soul. Guys, women make bad gods. And ladies, hello. Men make terrible gods. It took my wife 10 years to train me to put the toilet seat up, right? And I'm going to complete her and rescue her, right? If you turn to others and put expectations on your spouse or on your friends to fill a place of God, you are sowing conflict in your life because they can't do it. And don't get me started on our children, right? They are not gods, and our life should not revolve around them. Your expectations will crush them. You find the fullness of life in Christ, not others. Others are not our God. And the third place we turn to is the world. And one aspect of turning to the world is this: we turn to the stuff that the world can provide, right? Did you ever notice how new stuff makes us feel better about who we are? You get a new suit, right? Or ladies, you get a new outfit. It's like, bam, you're just a better person all of a sudden. A new car makes you feel better about who you are. But I got news for you. You're still you, just with debt, right? And it's like a drug, and it will own you. It will own you. You do not realize that, well, let me put it this way. You do realize that everything you own is going to a garage sale or to the dump eventually, right? Now, the second side of the world part of this is something that I'd call common grace. Common grace, these are good gifts from God that are in the world. A couple examples. Food, it's good, right? Food is a good gift from God. It's awesome. A fine wine to some people might be incredibly enjoyable. Sex is a good gift from God, right? Sex is awesome. There are great gifts in the world from God. But see, there are boundaries around these common graces that we need to stay within. And boundaries are a good thing. If you have little kids and you put a baby gate up across the top of the steps, right? You're a good parent for doing that. You're an awesome parent when you protect and place boundaries around your children. In the same way, God says, use food like this. Enjoy wine, but don't get drunk. Enjoy sex, but in this context. God is not trying to take anything from you. He wants to show you the fullness of joy that can be found in this world. And when we turn to the world outside of the boundaries that God has put in place, we are turning from God and to the world. So a quick summary. Maybe this will help you sort of see if one of these could possibly be a spot where you're turning from. If you're never satisfied with who you are, you might have turned to the self. If you continually feel let down or betrayed by others, then you may have turned from God to others. If new stuff is like a drug to you, or if you continually wake up and find yourself saying, I can't believe I did that again. I swear I'm not going to do that ever again, then most likely you've turned from God to the world. You know, in the Bible, we are often referred to as sheep, right? Do you know what the most difficult aspect of tending to sheep is? Sheep wander. They walk off. That is why shepherds have to watch sheep, because they have this innate tendency to just wander off. They wander off into the thickets of bushes and they get stuck. They wander off and right into a den of wolves. Some sheep will even wander off and walk right off a cliff. Folks, we are sheep, and we wander from God, and we get stuck in the bushes. And we find ourselves in a den of wolves. And sadly, sometimes we walk right off a cliff. Rethink, if you could, this turning from God aspect of this cycle. It's not always blatant, outright rebellion. Sometimes it's much slower. Have you turned from God? So see, the cycle tells us that when we turn from God, the next thing is that turning angers God. And when you think about the wrath of God or the anger of God, what do you think of? You know, when you turn from God, is it just like bam, and you get a good swift dose of wrath, right? Your car breaks down. You lose your job. Your girlfriend dumps you. Maybe it's an illness or an accident that sort of derails you. I think that we think that God's wrath is this sudden burst of anger. It's like we step up close to that line, don't go across that line, and then we do it, and it's like, bam, here's a lightning bolt of misery for you. It's God's wrath, right? What if we could change our perspective? What if instead of that, we viewed God's wrath as this steady coming against? Rather than God saying, don't do that. How dare you do that, you sinful wretch? what if God's wrath is, don't do that. Please, don't stop. Please, turn back to me. That is going to harm you. What if God's wrath is him trying to get our attention by gently applying force? Maybe it's placing an obstacle in your path. Maybe it's placing a person to speak truth and love into your situation. Maybe it's creating a circumstance that could cause you to realize that you have turned. Rethink God's wrath. What happens next in this cycle? It's opposition. In the book of Judges, God allows an oppressor, a neighboring nation, to come in and rule them. And in Judges 3, the first one is Mesopotamia, and then Moab, and then lastly the Philistines. And the people of Israel turned from God, and they actually started worshiping these nations' gods. And my guess is that God looked down at them and in his wrath said, stop doing that. That is going to harm you. Please turn back to me. And then you know what I think he eventually did? He just gets them out of the way. And he allows them to have what they wanted, and what they wanted wrecked them. He removed the baby gate from the top of the steps, and God's children hit the floor hard. And that fall, I believe, breaks God's heart. And I believe he wept over that nation, and he waited for them to cry out to return. And I believe this with all my heart. When we turn from God, and whether it's blatant, outright rebellion, or whether it's subtle when we turn to self or others or the world, God is so hurt by that. He's so wounded that he applies his wrath. No, don't do that. Please. That is going to harm you. But eventually, he steps out of the way and allows us to have what we want. The false gods of our world, and it wrecks us. And in those situations, God's posture is not, I told you so, fool. Now you're going to get what you deserve. I believe his posture is he's weeping over our pain. Are some of you on the right side of this cycle right now? Maybe you walked in here today not even realizing that, indeed, I think I begin to turn from God. Maybe right now you're realizing that you've turned from God and man, things just seem to be harder than they should be, and maybe that's God's wrath. Maybe there's obstacles or circumstances or people that are trying to get through to you. Or maybe you feel like, oh man, he stepped out of the way, and I crashed, and I'm in a pretty dark place right now. So what do? And one thing I want to say right up front, there's no silver bullet here. There's no quick fix. Ever see these commercials for 6-minute abs? Don't buy that video. You can't get six-pack abs in 6 minutes. You can't. There's no quick fix here. There is no silver bullet when you've turned from God. But let me just maybe give you a couple things to think about as I wrap up. I think the first thing that you've got to do is own up. You've got to fess up. You've got to come to the cross. There's no condemnation at the cross. You can come there and you can become sweetly broken. It's there where you need to be wholly surrendered. And once you've done that, then get up. Get up and turn back to God. Stand up and take a stance. Take courage. See, folks, maybe some of you have this rich family heritage of faith, like Othniel. And frankly, you're wasting it. Maybe some of you have been given this amazing warrior-like gift for the kingdom like Ehud, and you're wasting it. And maybe some of us, all we've got is a stick, like Shamgar. I can relate to Shamgar. I don't come from a family maybe of rich heritage of faith. I don't believe that I've got these laser amazing gifts. I believe that God's given me a stick, a leadership gift. And I want to use it faithfully. Because, see, if Shamgar can take out 600 Philistines with a stick and restore Israel, then I'm going to use what he has given me to impact the kingdom in this region as long as he will let me. What about you? Do you need to own it and get to that cross? Do you need then to stand up? What do you do when you stand up? Can I just throw a couple things at you? Some of you, I really believe you need to get help. You just need to get help. You're stuck in that cycle. And maybe that help comes in the form of some type of counseling or prayer ministry over you, a recovery ministry. Those are all available at all of our campuses. Maybe for some of you, you need to get somebody to disciple you. You need someone that's further along in their faith that you can reach out to and ask, will you disciple me in the foundations of faith? Because I'm tired of getting stuck in that cycle. And if you don't have that person or know who to ask, take your communicator card out, write on it your email and your cell phone number, your name, and say that you'd like to have someone disciple you, and we will do our best at every campus to make sure we pair you up with somebody. Maybe for some of you, it's get some help. Maybe for some of you, it's get generous. And don't tune me out here on this one, okay? But I believe there's some people probably today that have spent more on Valentine's Day this month than they'll give to the church. And just from my heart, the hardest thing for me to give up and to turn over to God was my checkbook. It was the last thing I sort of believe that I held on to. And since I've done that and said, God, this is yours, my life spiritually and relationally in so many other ways has grown. Some of you need to get generous. And the last one is some of you need to maybe just get missional. You know, I was meeting and praying out the Haiti team that left about a week ago, and I told them, this trip that you're about to go on, it's going to impact you spiritually like 52 sermons would have. Because there's power in listening, but doing trumps listening every time. Some of you need to get missional. You need to maybe partner with a local mission group at one of our campuses and get involved and get doing. Maybe for some of you it is a mission trip. Maybe it's mentoring a child in Homewood. But once you own up and fess up and get up, you've got to move towards God. And for you, maybe it's help being generous or getting missional. I just want to reiterate this. Own up. Get to the foot of the cross. Fess up there. And then stand up. Get the help. Get generous. Get missional. And God will meet you there. And Northway, rumble, Northway, rumble. There's no telling what we can do when we get freed up out of that right side of the cycle. I'm going to ask us to stand. I'm going to ask each campus leader now to step up at their campus and close you out.